This is AUGforums.com Real Talk, an unfiltered, independent perspective on Acumatica Cloud ERP. My name is Tim Rodman, and I want to mention three things in this pre-recorded intro before we get started. First, thank you to our sponsors. Our first sponsor is Repay. Repay offers omni-channel integrated payment solutions for Acumatica users. Whether you are making B2B payments or collecting them, Repay is your full-service payments provider. Power up your payments to empower your business and accelerate the AP and AR payment flow through one seamless integration. Our second sponsor is DataSelf. DataSelf Analytics is a revolutionary reporting solution that enables organizations to make the most informed decisions faster and easier than ever. It uniquely simplifies business intelligence, empowers anyone to build and access dashboards, and delivers critical business insight when and where you need it. Our third sponsor is Velixo. Velixo is an award-winning provider of Excel-based reporting solutions for Acumatica. With Velixo, you can build financial, project, and other business reports in Excel with live Acumatica data in just a few minutes and get the answers you need. If you know Excel, you can do it. Please take a minute to support this podcast by clicking each one of the sponsor banners located at augforums.com/sponsors. Our sponsors track clicks, and every click helps to support this podcast. The second thing I'd like to mention is that I'm always looking for victims. Guests. If you use Acumatica in any capacity, no matter how small, I'd love to talk with you. Check out augforums.com/podcast and click the link near the top of the page to learn more about being a guest on the podcast. Third and finally, I'd love to see you listed on my Rolodex. Check out augforums.com/Rolodex to find out who else is using Acumatica and read the instructions at the top to see how you can add yourself to the list. All right, that's it for the pre-recorded intro. Let's get started. Today is Monday, March 14th, 2022, and this is episode number 77. Richard Duffy, Acumatica University, and the Power of Free. Now it's March 14th here in Ohio, but I believe it's March 15th where you are, Richard, in Australia. I'll let you take a moment. Tell us who you are, and who you work for, what you do there.
Yep, fabulous. Always happy to be calling from the future. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Richard Duffy. I think Jon Roskill once referred to me as a ERP dinosaur. I've been in the ERP space and accounting software because, let's face it, before there was an acronym for it, that's what we used to call it back in the late 80s. It was called accounting software. Back in the days when personal computers had 8-inch floppy drives, and you had one disk for the programs and one disk for the data, and you were constantly madly swapping between them and hoping that the disks didn't get damaged. But been around in the ERP space for a long time, but primarily in Australia. For those of you who care about these things, because I think you can't know where you're going unless you talk about where you've been or where you've come from. I had my own business in the building industry doing waterproofing of all crazy things. And I bought myself a Commodore 64 computer and discovered that I related well to inanimate objects and, developed a passion for computing. And then I had an opportunity to start using the computer in my business. And, you were talking recently to one of the founders of Acumatica, and one of the things that he talked about was the background of personal computing and how programs like VisiCalc really changed things. And I still remember running a VisiCalc or a similar program on a Commodore 64. So that was my introduction to computing. And then when, in an economic downturn, my business crashed, I decided, well, that would be a good thing to get into, and started getting involved in personal computers. Went to work for an accounting software company in Australia called Attaché, and then lasted at that for a year, and then decided to go and start my own business implementing financial software. my first implementation was a GL, and I had no idea what a P&L was. So, pardon my coughing, still recovering a bit from COVID, but that was a baptism of fire. But from that point forwards, it's always been my passion, that software and how you could utilize it to really drive a positive change for a business. So,
which software was that you started implementing?
Yeah, it was called Attache, A-T-T-A-C-H-E. Pardon my Australian accent. Everyone will be trying to decipher, hang on, was that an A or an I, or what the hell did that guy say? But yeah, Attache software, it's still around, although they just got recently acquired and, pardon me, merged into somebody else's portfolio. So, I don't think that brand is long for this world, but so I was a partner. I used to go out and work with small enterprises, helping them deploy the software. Back in the days when, single user was all there was. And John Howell, it was the gentleman I was referring to before, he made that comment about going from single user to multi-user. And I remember those days crawling around underneath people's buildings, running coaxial cable to put in their networks for them. Back in the days, if you got a break in the cable, the entire network went down. But and then I made this discovery, this computer called a Macintosh. And there was this company called Great Plains and Great Plains Software. And they started as actually an Apple reseller in the main street of Fargo, North Dakota. And they built the software which everybody now knows became Great Plains Software and then became Great Plains Dynamics.
They started as an Apple reseller?
Absolutely, yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah, I'm well versed in the Great Plains history because I am a Great Plains and Doug Burgum disciple. I make no bones about that. The greatest experience of my entire life, and I learned the most working as a Great Plains partner and then working for Great Plains Software. Just a phenomenal company and a phenomenal experience. Yeah, it started off as a Apple reseller on the main street of Fargo, maybe not the main street of Fargo, North Dakota, but in Fargo, North Dakota. So yeah, there you go. Another little bit. Yeah, yep. And back in those days, that was the days when that's how companies started. If you guys had a great idea, and similar to John's story about Solomon, it just grew from there. And then, of course, Doug Burgum bought into the company with his background from Arthur, North Dakota, with the Burgum family, used to do all the grain elevators and all that kind of stuff. So, seeing that whole community feel, that was really my first introduction to it, to the power of community and going along to those Great Plains events, which were called Stampede to Fargo. And so, just getting that introduction to the community. But yeah, so that I thought, well, accounting software for the Mac, what a great idea. And started selling that in Australia, was one of the first partners here. When I'd go out and say Great Plains, and people would think I was trying to sell them a flight simulator. I
never thought about that. I could see that.
Yeah, spent a bunch of time doing that. And then Great Plains got acquired by Microsoft, and it became Microsoft Great Plains Business Solutions. Then it just became Microsoft Business Solutions, which was a terrible choice of name because the immediate acronym for that is Microsoft BS. That was a great time. Spent 5 or 6 years as part of that world, launching the product and really growing it in Australia and then across Asia Pacific. Learned a lot about the power of the partner channel, and being a partner myself and seeing how critical it was for partners to be engaged and for partners to be educated, because let's face it, people won't sell what they don't understand. And then that was really my introduction to this whole concept of education. So then moving forwards, then at the turn of the century, I love saying that, at the turn of the century, I was approached to join. Yeah, it's a big German software company. Yeah, it's good for you. It's good for me. I think so. Yes. I joined the SAP and it helped to start and launch and do the SAP Business Fund. So spent 13 years, or did it just feel like 13 years? Spent 10 years in various roles at SAP, and then was invited to come and join Acumatica, relocate my wife and I and our 2 dogs to beautiful downtown Kirkland, and the rest, as they say, is history. So that's kind of a little bit about that. I mean, after I left Acumatica and came back to Australia, I now run my own business doing cloud hosting for SAP Business One, but don't hold that against me. Acumatica is sold here in Australia under the name MYOB Advanced. Still engaged and involved in that community, and still a passionate follower of what's happening there with Acumatica, and always exciting to see the company growing and going from strength to strength. Because the thing that really drew me to Acumatica first and foremost was the technology, and I still absolutely love the platform and what they've done with it. I think some of the things that MYOB have done here in Australia, some of the decisions they made about how they wanted to bring the product to market here, probably, and this is just my opinion, so you can do with it what you will. I actually think some of those things were a mistake, because they've removed a bunch of the things that made Acumatica so powerful and attractive in their desire to stamp the MYOB brand on the product. But anyway, that's just my view of the world. So
looking at your LinkedIn profile, you got Acumatica April 2014 to September 2015, and I remember very well the second date. The first date, I'm not remembering right now when Jon Roskill got there. Do you recall, was he there when you got it there, or not yet?
Well, it was kind of funny. So I was originally hired by Sergey Belasev and Yuri Larachev. And so I packed up the family, resigned from SAP, and I get a call from Yuri saying, "Hey, I'm moving to another company in Sergey's product family. I'm going off to," I think from memory, he went to Parallels, or it might have been Cronus. No, I think it was Parallels. And so he said, "I'm not going to be here anymore, but there's a new guy here, Jon Roskill. He's taking over." And so when I arrived in Seattle shortly thereafter, Jon had settled into, was starting to settle into his role as the CEO. So I was reporting directly to Jon.
That's interesting.
So yeah,
I remember the second date really well, though, because September 2015 is when I started at Acumatica, and I remember being really disappointed. I guess it was sort of similar, but on a lower level, when that I was really looking forward to getting to work with you on university and community stuff, and then I find out, like, on my way in, that you're not there anymore. And I think the last time I talked to you was right around there. I think you were like on your way back to Australia, making a last stop at a outlet store somewhere, and I was basically just really bummed out that I wasn't going to get to work with you. That's kind of funny. That's similar, but lower level.
Sometimes you find you're a square peg in a round hole, and I love working at Acumatica, but I can be a little bit of a challenging personality to work with. And sometimes things just don't quite work out the way you want them to, and you've got to, as the wise old man of country music, Kenny Rogers, once said, you've got to know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to walk away, and know when to run. And this was the time was right to walk away and return back to Australia. But hopefully there was some legacy that I had an opportunity to leave behind. And maybe that might be what you want to focus on, because when I came to Acumatica, one of the things that I'd learned, and I alluded to this earlier, was how important it was to have a community, and how important it was to have a platform and a process for educating that community. And when you talk about software, to me, the most important part of the community are the users. Now, the good thing is, if you do it right, if you build a platform that works for users, then you build a platform that works for partners that resell a product, and vice versa. If you build a platform that works well for partners, then you've got a platform that works well for users as well. And then, of course, if you treat everyone with respect, if you realize that partners cannot exist without customers, and software companies cannot exist without partners and customers, then you build things in a way that doesn't disenfranchise or exclude any one of those audiences. You can take one platform and make it so it fits all of those different audiences. Does that make sense?
You know, I've never heard it described that way, but I think the same way. But I find that most people don't. Like they look at, you need one area for partners, you need another area for customers. And I could see how you would, like on the marketing and selling side and stuff, you need to be a VAR.
Absolutely.
But when it comes to product, I don't buy into this partners are smarter than customers mindset that a lot of people have. And I look at it similarly. I've never heard it put that way, though. If you build it well, I'm going to take the first part of your statement. If you build it well for customers, it also works for partners. And I think the same way. I think it's great.
Yeah. And look, I had the advantage of, when I came into Acumatica, there are already a bunch of great people doing some really great things for the partner community. You know, they had a really good, genesis of a partner program. There was one guy in particular who I worked with. He reported to me, but I kind of don't pay much attention to those who reports to who. I kind of view every relationship as a peer relationship. But Charlie Horton was his name, and he had done a phenomenal job of building a partner program and putting together, the basics of what was required for that partner program, with a certification process, a recognition process where you would earn badges according to your capabilities that you had built, and according to the achievements that you had reached. So, that was really, really good. And actually, on my YouTube channel, you can still find some of the videos that I built when I was at Acumatica, because I never take any of those things down. Because
some of those ones with you and Charlie on the couch at the office there.
That's the ones.
Okay.
Yeah. So we talked about. Yeah, we talked about a bunch of those kinds of things, and why those things are important to have from a partner perspective. But then, of course, what was I going to say? Success has many fathers, but failure is an orphan. So I'm going to take credit for a couple of things, but different people have different recollections. But I've always believed that these things are important, and then what happens over time is more and more people get attached to these things, and then you start seeing things like gamification, that you get you get a really good concept, and then it gets the buzzwords attached to it, and then the audience builds, and then you kind of go, oh, okay, well, that was a good idea, but now it's just a buzzword bingo. But that original concept of encouraging people to learn more and build their skill set, through that, Charlie was one of the people who was instrumental in making that happen. So a shout out to Charlie. I'm not sure what he's doing now, but he was a great contributor to that process. But then
so there's one piece of the Acumatica University specifically that I want to ask you about. And it's kind of a buzzword, but it's kind of not, because it always carries weight. and that is a 4-letter word, free. Was that a hard battle? Was that like a battle that was already fought, by the time you got there, or was that a battle that you participated in fighting to make sure that that was free and not a profit center for Acumatica?
Look, I think in any organization, you're always going to have different approaches. And certainly that was the case with Acumatica University, because there was a school of thought that said, well, you should monetize everything. If you're going to do something, don't ever do it for free. Whereas my philosophy, and the one that I fought for, and Jon Roskill, to his credit, supported, was this idea that you want to reduce the barriers. You want to reduce the barriers to entry. And I remember talking to John Reed about this just after we launched it. And I did a similar thing when I was at SAP, to be honest. There is an SAP Business One University. I actually built the original version of that, built it myself on WordPress, ran it myself, built a whole bunch of content for it, much to the chagrin of many corporate people at SAP. That's not how we do things at SAP. You must stop this social media. Why are you posting these things on social media? That is not how we do it. That the brand, we cannot control the brand if you are out there doing these things. And of course now everybody's doing it. So not saying that I was a pioneer, because pioneers are often found lying by the side of the trail with flaming arrows sticking out of their backs. There was a little bit of that, I must admit. But I took some of that and applied it to Acumatica. And there was, as I said, there was that appetite for it. So, and matter of fact, one of the things you'll see, and I still believe the Acumatica Partner Portal, well, some of it, we actually built it on WordPress. So
yes, I remember that. And actually, now that they have the new community site, which they inherited from IFS, I'm not sure how much of that remains, but I know that stuck around for many years after you were gone, the WordPress element to it.
And that was really a great example of the power of the Acumatica platform as well, was the fact that building that on WordPress and then being able to blend it in with the Acumatica content that was built and deployed inside an Acumatica framework. That was really easy because of the single sign-on and that open architecture of Acumatica as a product. So again, when I said before how much I love the product, absolutely, that's one of those proof points behind that. And if you're a customer listening to this and you're thinking, well, how do I do some of these things? Make sure you look at leveraging things like that. If you're going to build yourself an intranet, if you're going to build yourself a website, look at taking the best of both platforms. Don't feel you always have to build it all on Acumatica, or you have to build it all on WordPress or Drupal or Joomla or whatever the web platform du jour is. If you've got a really good product with Acumatica, a really open product, so make sure you leverage that. And that was really what the university was about making sure that it was possible for everyone, whether a customer or a partner, to learn what was possible with the product that they had. If there's one thing I've learned after 35 years in this industry, and I'm pretty sure it's been 35 years, I'm 58 now, so turning 59 later this year, but it is that if people, I think I said this earlier, if people don't understand what they can do with the product that they have, their chances of truly getting maximum value from that product are minimal. So it's incumbent, I think, on the vendor, and it's incumbent on the partners to make it as easy as possible to do that. And this is why the power of free is so important, because making something free, apart from my socialist leanings, so apologies, a whole bunch of people might switch off now, but apart from my left-wing socialist leanings of, making things affordable and making access to education equitable, if you don't educate people on how to use a product effectively, then they're never going to derive the true value. And at the end of the day, that's what people are looking to get from their investments, is they want to maximize the value. And that was the whole concept behind the university. And if you made it simple, you made it easy to access, you reduce the barriers to entry, then people would use it. They would start to get more value from their software. And then as a result of that, you get a whole bunch of people who then become evangelists. I used to call myself a product evangelist back in the days. I think Guy Kawasaki was the first one who coined that phrase at Apple. He called himself an evangelist. And, I attached myself to that back in 2007 when I was at SAP, because I figured that was my job, was to go out there and spread the word about the product. And that's what you see now with the MVP program that Acumatica has. And you see customers being recognized at the events for, not just being big companies and spending a lot of money with Acumatica, but for what they put back in terms of what they can contribute to the community and what they show people can be done with the platform. Does that make sense?
It does. And I want to ask you a little bit more about the Great Plains influence on that thinking, because I don't know. One is the free part. Was that something you picked up from Great Plains? And then the second part is the MVP part. Was that, I don't know if that was a Microsoft introduction or was it already there at Great Plains? And the reason why it's important to me is I know that a lot of Doug Burgum influence has carried over to Acumatica. I've heard a lot of people say the community feel is similar, especially when Jon Roskill was still around. But on those 2 points, free and the MVP, did those come from Great Plains?
Well, I mean, the one thing, and I always remember it, Great Plains' mission statement was to improve the lives and business success of partners and customers. That's what I got shortened down to. It used to be to improve the lives and business success of partners and customers through the provision of software, services, and blah, blah, blah. But you just encapsulate it down. That was a really great thing. And for those people who poo-poo the idea of having a mission statement, you can encapsulate it down into something that's that simple. It really drives everything that occurs inside the business. For example, if you couldn't get hold of a manager and you needed to make a decision, as long as you applied the benchmark of, does it improve the lives and business success of partners and customers? If the answer to that question was yes, and you weren't about to do something incredibly stupid or incredibly wasteful of funds, you would never, ever have to go back and second guess what you did. So that's the philosophy that I talked about, what influenced me. That's the philosophy that I picked up at Great Plains. Now then, to your original question about free and MVP, well, Great Plains, that stuff, as I recall, was not free. It was free if you were a partner, but not a customer. So back in the Great Plains days, I'm really showing my age here. Back when people used to run bulletin boards, which I used to run a bulletin board with my Commodore 64, an old modem, and I can't even remember the name of the software now, but these original communities and these original platforms, that's what they were built on. And that's how they started off. At Great Plains, it was called Partner Source. And it was really championed at Great Plains by a guy by the name of Rob Kirky, who I had a long and positive, business and personal relationship with as a friend and a colleague. So that was only available to partners. And then the idea was that, well, if a partner wanted to train customers, that was a revenue stream for them. So I wouldn't necessarily say that idea of free came from Great Plains, because it didn't, but certainly the idea of community did. Now the MVP, the idea of identifying champions out there in the market. I think many organizations, many software companies have done that, but I think certainly the MVP thing was really, I think it was Microsoft that really built that into a thing, and then it was something that then people just automatically attached to, because of course you've got your most valuable player in the NBA and things like that. So I think it's that whole concept of just being able to identify people who really, it was incumbent on everybody to recognize them and recognize their contribution to the community and contribution to the, well, yeah, let's call it the community, because that's everyone, whether it's partners, customers, employees of the software vendor, shareholders of the software vendor, they're all part of that community. So, you know, that's right.
I'd have to go check on this, but if you think it started with Microsoft, I would suspect it actually came from the Excel crowd originally. If you want to talk about software community pioneers, it's probably the Excel crowd. I have to go check on that.
It wouldn't surprise me. I mean, you know, the great thing now that this industry is so old, there are lots of historical stories, and there's lots of people who you know have documented some of those stories. So that's a good thing, and that's why it's good to have the opportunity to talk about some of these things and talk about how they came to fruition and what can you learn. Because I always used to say, you know, you can't know where you're going to go unless you know unless you can look at where you've come from. And you learn from that and apply what you learned from what you did, but also what everybody else did, whether they were competitors, whether they were partners, whatever the case may be. And all of that was important.
Yeah, so, and this isn't just ancient history here. I mean, the software changes, but the concepts don't. And, you know, I've heard there's a data podcast that I listened to, and I heard someone on there make a great point about, you know, even on the data side, there's so many new tools that people are using that they encounter problems that they think are brand new, and they were actually solved by older tools. And if they were just aware of the history of that, you know, they wouldn't have to reinvent the wheel, right? Or, you know, we learned that, I mean, that you don't know history, you're doomed to repeat it, kind of a thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, speaking of data, and I know you're a bit of a fan of Power BI. When I first looked at Power BI, I immediately attached to that, because it was a kind of a cool product, but the volume of free enablement that was available and still is on powerbi.com. I mean, you can go onto that website, you can download the product for free, you can get access to all that training for free, and the sky is literally the limit. It's just a matter of how committed you are to taking what's available and turning it into value for whatever the project is, whether it's value for you personally, value for the company you work for. And so there's lots of those examples out there of companies that have done that. Now, sometimes they go, they start off with a good idea and then they get a little bit too much structure. There was, I think, when I built the SAP Business One University when I was at SAP, for example, again, what did I build it on? Built it on WordPress, you know, and a bunch of WordPress plugins. Now, the current version, SAP went out and bought an e-learning platform company. So now they've moved everything onto this e-learning platform company, and the thing is just so cumbersome and unwieldy to navigate. It detracts from the experience. But I think that's the key, is to make sure you get the best of everything. You get the content, you get the people, and then you get the right platform. And if you get all those three things right, then you deliver a great experience for the audience. And that's what these things are about.
Yeah, and I'll agree with you on the Power BI free part. You know, that was one thing. It wasn't necessarily the free specifically. It was, hey, I know I'm going to pay for something that's worth it. but it was more the low barrier to entry. Hey, I can find out about it, which is kind of what you've been saying. And I'll balance your socialist leanings with a capitalist viewpoint on that, and that is that nothing is free. You still invest your time, right? But it seems like people, at least people in organizations, not necessarily the decision makers, you're willing to invest your time because that's what you have. You don't have the budget to control, but you've got your time to invest. And it's reminding me, I've heard this several times from multiple people, most recently from Brian Stevens on an earlier episode of this podcast, that he was just blown away that Acumatica would let you download it for free, give you access to the university for free. He was like totally suspicious, but he went the route of actually downloading it and actually building out like a little bit of a prototype before they even engaged. And I love that. And I think Power BI has been very successful. And I think Acumatica has as well, not just the free university, but the fact that you can download it with the 2 concurrent user limitation. To me, that's huge for, again, reducing that barrier to entry. And even if you don't do it, knowing that you can, I think builds trust initially with people.
Well, and this was an argument that I used to have, I've had internally at pretty much every software company I've ever been at, because you've got 2 schools of thought. One school of thought says, make it available, let people get their hands dirty. Another school of thought says, well, if they don't know what they're doing and they make a hash of it, then their first experience has been bad. And they go, well, this software is really complex. So with all these things, I think it's a balancing act. And that's one of the things which drove for me the necessity to create this concept of a university, was that A, you want to get the software in the hands of people before they've had to shell out money for it. But B, you want to make sure that they're not sitting there like, I have this expression that dogs chasing cars. Well, you watch a dog chasing a car, but if they ever caught one, what were they going to do with it? So it's like the people, they go, oh, okay, I've got this software now. I've got this free version of the software. Now, what am I going to do with it? Because I don't know what I don't know. So the concept of the university was to make sure that there was the supporting materials so that anybody in front of the software could get to it. This is another example of where this is really powerful. And I've seen this. I have a YouTube channel. I think it's got 1.5 million views or something, of lots of different content, a lot of SAP stuff, a lot of generic marketing stuff that I built, for partners, doing partner marketing. Back when I used to travel the world teaching people, marketing and social media, selling and all that kind of stuff, when it used to drive my colleagues at SAP crazy that I was doing it. But the idea behind it is that I get, and I still to this day, I get emails from people saying, thank you, I learned so much about product X from watching your videos. And that's what happens, because still to this day, you get people who get hired into a company, plonked down in front of a computer screen, and they're told, yeah, we use Acumatica, or we use SAP, or we use Dynamics GP, as Great Plains is now called, or we use whatever, have at it. And the person sitting there going, well, I've got no idea how to drive this thing. So this is where so many of these things are now, so great to have access to. So there's a whole range of things that are out there that are free. And then, of course, with the advent of platforms like Udemy, and of course, LinkedIn Learning, which you have to pay for. But there's now so much content out there which makes that possible. I just think it's phenomenal, and I like to comfort myself in knowing that, in some respects, that was something that I was really an evangelist for, and have now seen that become, what used to be the domain of a few passionate people has now become very much a mainstream thing that is encouraged by pretty much companies all over the world.
So I want to ask you about what looks like the latest iteration of this on your LinkedIn profile. It's ASUG, not AUG for Acumatica User Group, but ASUG for America's SAP Users Group. What's going on there, and what's your involvement with that? And how has everything you've been talking about how has that maybe changed in the latest iteration of what you're doing?
Well, actually, that's now a little bit old. So about 3 years ago, the American SAP User Group, which is it's the world's largest ERP software user group, paid memberships. They had what they called a special interest group for SAP Business One. So, I know this is an Acumatica podcast, but let me just talk about this for a second. SAP, everybody knows SAP, the big ERP company, but a lot of people don't realize that the most used ERP product of SAP's is SAP Business One. It's 70,000 customers all around the world in multiple localized versions. Now,
I didn't realize their customer count was that high. Wow, 70,000.
Yeah, 70,000 customers. And look, a lot of people don't, because SAP don't talk that much about SAP Business One anymore, but there's critical mass there now. So the software continues to grow double digits, as it does for Acumatica, and there's space in the market for more than one product, of course. So, it's great to see that there are these different products which have different characteristics that that suit different businesses. I'm just glad one of the reasons why I left Microsoft when I did was they just acquired Navision and Exapta, and I was from Great Plains. All of a sudden, they had 3 products which were competitors, all stuck under the same team. And what they used to do was, when a lead came in, they would send the same lead to 3 different partners, one selling Dynamics GP, one selling Navision, and one selling Exapta, and let them fight it out in the market. Wasn't a great experience for the customer. So that's somewhat of a challenge. I think they've now narrowed that one down, but fortunately, I've not ever had to deal with that. But look, getting back to your original question, ASUG had this special interest group for SAP Business One, and they came to me and they said, look, we've seen what you've been doing, just off your own bat around SAP. We'd really like to encourage this subset of users inside ASUG and really grow the SAP Business One community. And we built this thing that was called One Source. So the idea being one place where you could go to get all this information. And I built about 9 hours of video content, as well as presenting at their regular events, which of course, like most events, came to a halt because of COVID. But presenting at the events, doing blog posts, doing webinars, all those kinds of things, just promoting all of this stuff about SAP Business One. I had some SAP Business One partners who despised the ground I walked on, because they felt that was, overstepping the line, making too much available for free. But look, at the end of the day, you can't please everyone. But I think overall, it was a great experience, and people you can still access that content on my website, because when that initiative was closed, was terminated at ASUG for various internal reasons I won't go into. But, they said to me, well, you keep the content and you can continue to utilize that content. And so I put it all up on our website at smbsolutions.com.au and on my YouTube channel. So, good content has a very long half-life, because a lot of the time with software, some of the cosmetics change, but the fundamentals don't. And that's why don't ever be concerned if you're looking at, and this is for the audience who are tuned into this, my philosophy is don't ever be concerned if you think, oh, well, gee, this content was built in 2008. It's now no longer relevant, or this content was built in 2013. It's now no longer relevant. If it's good content, you'll find that there'll be something that you'll gain from it. And that's what I've certainly seen. And that's why I don't ever take content down.
I agree. Yeah, there's always the soft side versus the hard technical side. Yeah, the hard technical side might have changed a little bit, but the soft side is just as applicable. Yeah.
And for any vendor who's starting off in this, the fundamental, there you go. The fundamental thing to do is build a series of fundamentals. So you build some fundamentals training, and to this day, those fundamentals videos that I've done, they got like 10,000, 20,000, 100,000 views of them, and people still come back and look at it, even though they were built. Now, some of them were built, heck, 7, 8 years ago, because they still apply because they're fundamentals. So
I want to ask you about the business side, but before I do a quick time check, do you have another 5-10 minutes, or do you need to run?
In case you haven't realized, audience, I can talk forever. So no, the great thing about my current business is that because we've done it so well and automated everything, there's very little for me to do, except have the pleasure of talking to people like you, Tim. So my team is happily manning the few phone calls, support calls that we get that come in, and keeping everything humming along. So I got time.
Well, that's a good tie-in then. If you got nothing to do, that means you did something right there. I guess my business tie-in is, all right, let's say I'm listening to this, and let's say I'm an Acumatica bar, all right? And let's say I don't have socialist leanings, and I don't want to invest time unless I can make some money off of it. YouTube views are great. It gives you a nice warm fuzzy to see your view count go up. But look, this is ERP software. You're not going to become a YouTube star on ERP software and make any significant monetization on the YouTube platform with ERP, especially a small product like Acumatica. So if I'm looking at that, especially specifically on your point about building 9 hours of content for ASUG, what business benefit do you derive from that? And why should a capitalist person be motivated to do something similar?
Well, look, this ties back to this whole concept of the power of free and my philosophy that you don't need to monetize everything, because I've always been a firm believer, and I've just seen this play out in my own business now that we've been on operations now for more than about 4 years. First 2 years were very small, but then the business has doubled 2 years ago and doubled again last year. You do things right and the revenue will come. Now, I'm a fan of, there was a book written by a guy called Michael Gerber, and he wrote a book called The E-Myth, Why Most Small Businesses, and you could remove the word small, but why most small businesses don't work and what to do about it. And he once, it stuck in my head, he said, there are some people who will say, if you do all the right things, the money will take care of itself. Well, the money never takes care of itself. So you've always got to have an eye on revenue. But the power of doing these things, the power of building that content. And I often get people who reach out to me, because this is one of the other advantages or disadvantages, depending on how you look at it. I have literally thousands of people that I'm connected to through LinkedIn and through social media. And they often reach out to me for help, asking me, can you help me with this? Can you do me a favor? I've got this problem. The software is not working. I need this, I need that. I've picked up some really good consulting gigs as a result of that. But B, it's great to help people. But to your original question about why would a VAR want to do this? Well, it basically just establishes your skill set, and it puts a marker out there that says, hey, this is what we do for our community, with no expectation of a revenue return. So then if you're a customer and you're sitting there looking at it, you go, well, these guys aren't trying to put a dollar value on everything. And clearly, from what I can see, they know their subject. So they're subject matter experts. So if I'm looking for somebody to help me, who is the logical person to go and talk to? Well, it's this company. Now, there is a lot of content out there now. So that is less of a driver I think, in terms of being able to drive inbound marketing. But it's almost now, I would say, it's almost like become table stakes. You've got to have that content. You've got to have it there and make it available to your customers. Otherwise, you look like there's something fundamentally missing. And if you don't have it, people are going to want it. They're going to go looking for it, and they're going to find it from somebody else. Is that really what you want? Them to be finding that information from somebody else? You know, maybe you do everything else really well, so they'll never leave you. But, you know, why take the chance? Why not build that content and use it as a, you know, as a marker to say, this is us, this is what we do, this is what we know, and this is our approach to helping you get more value from the product that we sell without necessarily expecting you to hand over $1 as a result of every transaction, of every interaction. Not every interaction has to be a transaction, I guess is the way I would put it.
I like that. Not every interaction has to be a transaction. I like that. What's also coming up in my memory.
Yeah, unfortunately, many people think that's how everything has to be. You know, the one thing I hate with a passion at the moment is this concept of hustle culture. Always be hustling, always be working, always be looking for, always be trying to think about, how do I make $1 out of this? Oh, gee, here's the person I might want to connect to in LinkedIn. How am I going to make $1 out of that connection? It's like, well, you know, you go into these things with the right intention, in my experience, and the money will follow. Like all these consulting things I've done. You know, a lot of the time I'll say, well, no, I'll do it. People say, well, how much is it going to cost? I say, I'll do it for you for free. And they go, no, I'm not going to let that happen. I want to pay you. Okay, well then my hourly rate is, you know, whatever it is. And then, you know, you go from there. So not everything has to be a conscious monetization exercise.
And when you mentioned like doubling the business, I'm not even clear. Your business that you're talking about, are you more of a VAR? Are you more of a marketing company? Or are you more of like a hosting company? I mean, what is that business for you these days?
We're a hosting company. We could sell SAP Business One. We could sell, you know, MYOB Advanced here in Australia if we wanted to. I've certainly got the skill set, the knowledge to do it. But one thing I believe in is specialization. So what we did is we said, and let me be clear, I have no financial affiliation anymore with anything to do with the Acumatica world. You know, mainly because, not by choice, but just because of the way things have panned out. My business right now is basically hosting SAP Business One for companies around the world, primarily in Australia, New Zealand, and Southeast Asia. But, you know, we have global aspirations. We're moving into the United States this year. But all we do, we don't sell Business One. We don't support Business One. We don't do training on Business One. What we do is we built and manage the platform to deliver SAP Business One in the cloud. Partners go out and sell the software to the customer. They call us and they say, I've got a customer, they've got, you know, 10 users, 20 users, they want, you know, Business One on HANA. We provision it and then make sure it runs successfully. So some people go, well, hang on, why wouldn't I go to AWS or somebody like that for something like that? Well, what the hyperscalers, as their, you know, I think is the trendy word for them. The hyperscalers like AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, Alibaba, all those guys, all they'll provide you is tin. So they'll provide you with hardware, but somebody still has to make the application run on that hardware. Somebody still has to secure it, manage it, maintain it, upgrade it, monitor it, do all those things. That's what we do, as well as we own all of our own servers as well. We don't utilize AWS or Azure. Went down that path and realized we can do it for about 1/3 of the cost of what they charge without all of the restrictions. So
I've heard a similar story with other ERP products, yeah, versus using Azure or Amazon. No, and it's interesting that your business then is even like one step removed from a VAR in terms of whether the content really shows that you're an expert or not, right? I mean, if someone's watching your videos about SAP Business One, showing them how to do something, that's not really your hosting business, right? And yet it still has established some trust and still helped you out. So I think that's interesting that for a VAR, that's even more so the case because they're demonstrating something that is what they're selling, not just, hey, you should trust me.
Well, our value proposition is that we are experts in making the software run effectively in a high performance, highly secured environment. And so the only way you can do that is if you understand the software. Unfortunately, with the majority of cloud and infrastructure as a service is, to be honest, they don't care what you put on it, whether you're running ERP software, CAD software, or a dubious website with dubious content. They really don't care because all they're interested in is selling you the compute power, the memory, and the storage. If something goes wrong with it, they really can't help you if it's not the compute, memory, or storage. Then they go, well, you're on your own. You got to figure this stuff out. Our advantage is we know the whole thing from, to use that hackneyed expression, from soup to nuts, so when something goes wrong, we don't ever put people in the situation where we say, oh, well, that's somebody else's problem. We can usually triage and diagnose the problem and then hand them back to their partner if they happen to have called us first, so
that's really cool.
It all ties together.
Since I maybe have you for a few more minutes, you got any other good stories from your days at Acumatica?
Well, I've got some stories. I don't know if I'd want to repeat any of them. But it's like all those things. I think, the time that I spent working at Acumatica was great. I met some really great people. I met some really great partners, and learned a lot, about cloud and, what is true cloud? I mean, there used to be this argument about, is something true cloud or is it not true cloud? And it used to get into these arguments about what was the architecture and is it, Ajax, is it JSON, is it, all these not Acumatica, all these acronyms, which mean something to a whole bunch of technologists and maybe a whole bunch of analysts. And even, I don't know, I'd be interested in John Reed's take on this because I remember, back in 2014, talking to John and Brian Summer and, Dennis Howlett, these guys from Diginomica and analysts. Everybody was really passionate about this whole topic of, was it true cloud? Was it cloud washing? Was it this? Was it that? To be honest, from what I can see, that whole discussion has now gone away. People don't care. They go, can I access it in a browser? Yes. Can I pay for it by month? Yes. Can I increase and decrease my user count on demand? Yes. Then it's cloud, So working at Acumatica really gave me the opportunity to see what in those days was being pushed as a true cloud application. And then seeing how the market has, for want of a better term, changed and adjusted, and how customers drive everything. If you don't do something with a view to what the customer wants, then you're on a, as we say in Australia, you're on a hiding to nowhere. You're going to get beaten up and you're going to lose everything. So customers will tell you what matters. And most customers don't care about that stuff. They just care that it does the job. It does what they were told. They can figure out how to use it. They're not being charged for every breath they take, every call they make. It sounds like the police song. But, I'll be every breath you take, every
I'll
move
be charging
you make,
you.
I'll be charging you. Yeah. If you have a vendor that that's their policy, run away as quickly as you can, because it's not a recipe for success long term. And if you're, for want of a better term, and people can say this guy's an idiot, doesn't know what he's talking about, but my philosophy is, if that's the way you run your business, you might be not in business. You might be in business for a long time, but you won't be in business for a good time, because customers will very, very quickly learn to hate you, because they soon see that all you are to them is money in their bank account. And who wants to deal with businesses like that? I certainly don't.
Well, I actually have a story for you to illustrate the true cloud point that I've heard from your days at Acumatica from a partner who I can't remember who it was now, but what made a huge impression on them was, like you said, all the debate about what is true cloud. It wasn't that. What made a huge impression on them is they were in a room with you and you said, all right, I'm going to demo Acumatica. Can someone give me a laptop? And you just took whoever's laptop in the room was willing to give you their laptop, and you gave the demo on that laptop, and that is what sold them. I think that was just a great way to cut through all the noise and demonstrate true cloud without the bullet points. I think that was great. Great move there.
Yeah, well, and that's something I must admit, I've been telling people to do that for years. But look, so many people are concerned about controlling the environment. And this is like, you see the sales guys, and the sales guys are all like, well, I must control everything. I must control the demo environment. I must control the data. I would even, when I was doing presentations, I remember a couple of events, I actually even got an audience member up to actually do the demo with me. So, and I would just stand there and provide them a little bit of guidance and ask them to, okay, let's go and let's create a customer record. Great. Let's go and now generate an invoice for that customer. Great. So here's this person who's not a user of the software. They just came up with a little bit of coaching from me. They were able to immediately use the software. Well, that to me is software that's easy to use. So, don't be afraid of losing, in inverted commas, control of a situation, I think is the takeaway, certainly that I have from that whole process and that experience.
Well, it's probably the same crowd that's concerned about letting people into the university, right? I mean, someone's going to go shoot themselves in the foot.
Or they're going to misinterpret something, or you're going to admit that something you've got isn't quite right. It could be better. Or hey, here's a list of all the current issues that we know about. Don't ever, publish that. Well, that's just crap. That's, as I'm showing my age here. A sales guru from many years ago, Zig Ziglar, he would say that's what Zig Ziglar would call stinking thinking, because that's just not the reality of the world in which we live in. So instead,
I'd love to do a study.
You don't tell people about it. They have to fall over these things by accident, or they're sitting there struggling for a week with a bug that they didn't know was a bug. Whereas if they had a ready reckoner and a listing of all these things, they're going to go, oh yeah, the vendor knows about that. Not ideal, but let's face it, every software package ships with bugs because nobody's perfect. These are complex applications, but at least you've told me so I don't waste my time chasing my tail. Do you know what I mean? So again, that's the philosophy behind that.
Yeah, it'd be great to do a study, with like, you could get your hands on 500 prospects who have never seen a particular ERP software, and somehow, one-on-one take them through that process, or let them do it on their own, and kind of keep track of how many of them fall in one of those two camps. I think that'd be interesting. I'm totally in line with you, but I often wonder, what's the reality out there? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, and look, at the end of the day, in our business, we have a set of core values, and we call it, like, I'm a big believer in not in acronyms for acronyms' sake, but acronyms because they're easy to remember. We call it TRACE, TRACE. And, the T in TRACE is about being transparent. So it's transparent, respectful, agile, consistent, and effective and economical. So, that's what each of those letters stand for. But the transparent piece is so critical, is that you're never trying to hide anything. If there's a problem, you acknowledge it, you talk about it, you talk about what caused it, and you talk about what you're going to do about it and what you have done about it. So transparency, I think, is important, and that then ties back into this whole idea of having that content, having a community where you are transparent to the community. If somebody's, before they'll talk to you, the first thing you have to sign is a non-disclosure agreement. You'd probably want to scratch your head and go, well, is this the kind of conversation I want to have anyway? So those things are important, and they all tie back into that concept.
Well, I definitely appreciate
in my
your
opinion.
contributions. No, I think the same way, and I really appreciate your contributions to kind of, when things were more malleable in the earlier years of Acumatica, helping to nudge it more in that direction. And, I'll just say, I let everyone know I wanted to call this episode Richard Duffy, the grandfather of Acumatica University. You didn't agree with that, but we're calling this something else. But I definitely think you did have a significant impact on the openness. Of course, you're not the only one, but you did have a big impact on the open culture that we all kind of take for granted a little bit today. And I definitely appreciate your contributions to that.
Well, thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk to people. And again, I'm easy to find on the internet. And if anybody ever has any questions or anything about any of these topics or any of the things that I've talked about or anything like that, just reach out.
What's the best way? LinkedIn or website? You don't even know anymore.
Any way will work. So
I'll drop a few links on the episode page.
Look, there's richardduffy.com. I'm on LinkedIn. I don't, to be honest, I don't do Facebook anymore, because I have a significant difference of opinion about the role of Facebook in our society. So I just voted with my feet. But yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on richardduffy.com, smbsolutions.com.au. I've got my YouTube channel. I'm like a plague on the internet. If you search for Richard Duffy, you'll either find me or a Welsh football player or soccer player. So I'm the one who's talking about ERP.
Well, I'll drop some links on there. Hey, thanks for taking the time today. Thanks for going over. I really appreciate it.
Well, hopefully I didn't bore everyone to death, and pardon my occasional coughing and spluttering.
Well, I thought it was just fine. I know I enjoyed it. That's all that matters on these things. If anyone else did too, that's just bonus points.
Absolutely. Great. Thanks, Tim.
All right. Well, that's it for now. We'll catch you on the next episode of AUGforums.com Real Talk. Thanks for listening, and take care.